Welcome to this week's review. An extremely busy week, as you can see. 5 total trades taken, 3 losers, 2 winners, and a net P&L of about $160. Effectively break even. And as I scroll down, all of them met the plan, but all of them were high risk. And I think only when I'd finalized my trade recap for all the individual underlying positions. And only when I was kind of zooming out and looking at the overall sort of risk rating of the trades, it was a lot of high risk, some low quality positions. And I think that helps to explain, I think, the outcome. Perhaps one or two that on a different day I wouldn't have taken, even though they met the plan. And so even though, look, it's a small positive, but a break even at the end of the day, part of me is like, I feel very disappointed at the end of this week. And I don't know if that's because I'm just edging closer to passing this challenge and it feels like I'm doing the break even dance bit. But in hindsight, the way I'm feeling now is how I usually feel when I'm down a percent or two for the week. So it's nice problems to have. What did I learn this week? And just as a disclaimer, I'm spending a lot more time and energy in crafting individual trade recaps. And so all these positions taken will be covered in the Daily Nugget that I post primarily as shorts. If it's a bit longer because there was more to discuss, then it will be an official video. So keep an eye out for those. There have been quite a few trades that I'm taking, and in between the content that I'm posting around strategy development and current topics, I do throw in these trade recaps, which helps me understand in a bit more detail why I took a position, what I've learned from it, and ultimately what I'm taking away from it that helps me improve as a trader. So I learned this week that things change extremely quickly in these market conditions. We started the week with uncertainty around what the tariff announcements in the previous week meant for the market. And that overnight turned into a 90-day pause with, the baseline of 10% kind of just being implemented until then, but then a full-blown war, a tariff war between the US and China. And so because of this policy uncertainty, there's a lot of changing dynamics, and that obviously filters down into the volatility of price on a day-to-day basis. And I think as a result of that, price breaks out aggressively after periods of correction. And so we're seeing a continued synchronicity between how technicals are playing out and fundamentals that drive those technicals. However, there's more volatility, I think, across the spectrum, and that when we have tighter periods of consolidation, we'll be more volatile in those periods, if that makes sense. It's higher volume moves still contained within, a tight range. But then when we do have that impulsive leg, market covers, weeks, sometimes months of price action in a day or a couple of days. And so there's a lot of potential market conditions like that, I think, especially as I adopt a bit of a looser profit-taking approach instead of the fixed 2-hour target. And so I think in these conditions where things change so much and there's so much opportunity, but also heightened risk on the one end, sticking to the plan, regardless of how tempting it is to deviate, becomes very important. And I noted that where I was tempted to take a trade outside of my trading hours, that would have resulted in a loss, but in hindsight, I was glad that I stuck to that. But then in that, I noted that I didn't do this when I manually closed my position on pound CAD on Friday. Was running in profit, and it just didn't make sense to me to hold that over the weekend where I know in these past couple of weeks the market is very prone to gapping. And initially I was thinking this could work against me if, we gap into profit. Um, for whatever reason, look, I didn't have take profit set, but this could work for me. And, I could get gapped into an extreme profit. But I think that's dangerous thinking because anything can happen, and the opposite could have been equally as true, considering how we really don't know what the Trump administration is going to drop on us next, or how China are going to retaliate, or how the EU are going to respond, or what developments are going to take place there. And so, with so much uncertainty, deviating from the plan to avoid, severe loss of capital if it gapped against me in a manner in which, that trade violated my daily, max drawdown. I don't think the risk that I had on the position would have allowed that, but it could. It's possible. We've seen how much the market can move in a short period of time. And so when the risk is complete loss of capital or, loss of capital to an extent that puts you in a position or an unfavorable position with investors or, in this case with, the prop firm that I'm trading for, then it becomes an easier decision to say, my plan says I hold over the weekend, but I'm trading in a slight profit, just close because worst case, if I close, I miss out on a 1%, 1.5%. And that's a better trade-off than the opposite, which is, potentially, obviously, worst case, 0.5% loss if it takes me out at that point, but it could have been worse depending on the gap. And so I think that's an example of where I think discretion can be useful and can work for you. So going into this week, the most important thing I need to work on improving is my trade journal template, just to incorporate more meaningful tags, and that as I approach the next revision of my plan as something that's come to the forefront, in that there's a bit of discretion in the way I review positions. And I don't think that's a terrible thing because some things aren't black and white, but I think my trade journal could use a lot less of that discretion and a lot more meaningful tags that over time build meaningful reports and insights. And not saying I shouldn't have a section that focuses mainly on the discretion of, the post-trade, but I think just to reduce it a bit will be quite important as I look to kind of just upgrade my trading regimen and processes. So the most important thing I should continue doing this week is remaining consistent with the daily nuggets and my development as a trader. There are some very cool things that are in the works, some very, very cool opportunities that have come my way, and you guys will see that in time. And I'm just so excited for how sharing this journey and committing to my trading has opened up so many doors. And so I think at the foundation of that, it just started with remaining consistent as an individual and showing you guys, what that consistency looks like, I guess, in real life. And so that is the review. This is the Alpha Capital terminal, just for that transparency. Yeah, a very busy week, but a profitable week nonetheless, even though it was practically break even. So remember, guys, consistency is the choice you make. You start doing the things you know you should be doing day in and day out.